there's only one man battling the forces of evil. They are coming.
No!
They will find you.
No!
They will search for answers no one has dared to go to save the world. There is only one.
To be the man, you gotta beat the man!
He is legend.
Okay, we're at Darlie Routier Fact and Fiction, separating the truth from lies in Darlie Routier trial, written by our friend Mary Moody years ago. There's an effort to keep it in video form so that people can refer to it for years to come. We went through the introduction, the who's who, the Routier statements, the arrest warrant, Arthur Barb Davis, all of the myths. We are in her own words. We went through 1 and 2. Now we're on statement 3, Darlie's own words. Some nurses said they didn't see the bruises on my arms. Statement number 3. Some nurses said they didn't see the bruises on my arms. That's a complete lie. Everyone saw me in the hospital said they saw my bruises. There's no doubt that Darlie had large red-purple bruises on her inner right arm when photographed at the police station on 6/10/96. However, all medical personnel testified that there was no swelling, redness, or even the early stages of bruising while she was under the care from June 6th to June 8th, a total of 2.5 days. Dr. Dillon examined Darlie's arm every day, including the day of the discharge, and saw no evidence of blunt trauma. Shook. And is that something you look for in your examination of her? Dillon. Yes, if I saw that on somebody's arm, I would probably want to x-ray their arm. Shook. Any time on the 6th, did you see any evidence of that type of injury to her right arm? Dillon. None at all. Shook. The 7th. No. Dillon. No. Shook. The 8th. Dillon. No. Shook. Now, if that blunt trauma had occurred on June the 6th, about 2:30 in the morning, 1996, would you have seen evidence of that injury on her right arm, doctor? Dillon. In my opinion, yes. There is a lot of blood. Yes. Dr. Santos. To get that type of bruising, you usually see evidence of it within 24 hours. I would say that injury is 24 to 48 hours old. Christopher Wilgoss, nurse. There was no bruising or swelling that would be consistent with blunt trauma. Even a few hours later, I would have seen the beginning of it. There would have been a large amount of localized swelling at the site that the trauma took place, and it would have taken 24 to 48 hours for it to become apparent. Jody Cotner, nurse, trauma coordinator. I didn't see any injury that would cause that type of bruising. Absolutely, I would have seen evidence of blunt trauma if it had occurred at 2:30 a.m. on June the 6th. Diane Holland, nurse. There was nothing on her right arm that would leave this type of bruise. Paige Campbell, nurse. When I bathed her right arm, I had to move it around. She never complained of any pain in her arm. Darlie had a much smaller bruise on her left arm. It was consistent with the arterial line that had been left in her left wrist. This bruise was turning yellow-green on 6/10. The right arm bruises, however, were red-purple on 6/10. Fresh bruises, inflicted within the last 48 hours. Incidentally, Darlie had no IVs in her right arm. Both IVs were in her left. Dr. Vincent DeMaio testified for the defense. Inexplicably, he claimed that the bruises on both arms were the result of blunt trauma on 6/6, even though the coloration was significantly different. Caught in this contradiction, he then admitted that the right arm bruises could have happened on June the 8th. Everyone that Darlie claims saw those bruises in the hospital were limited to her family and friends. Their testimony was strongly influenced by one of Darren's relatives, who sat in the courtroom and took extensive notes of the testimony by prosecution witnesses. She then shared that information with friends and family members who were slated to testify for the defense. There's more about this if you go back to Myth 12 in this video series. Sherry Moses, which is Darlie Key's sister, was questioned about that. I could bring you there, but I'm on this. The whole thing of Sandy Akins, Darren's aunt, sitting in the courtroom as a courtroom spectator. She was writing notes. She kept writing notes. And then she would get up and go out to the people that were set to testify and share those notes with them. When you're set to testify in a court trial, you are to remain outside of the court while the other testimony is going on, and you can't be in the court until after you've testified. She was sharing these notes, and they got to talking about the bruises right before Sherry Moses came on the stand. That's when Sandy Akins went out there and said, look, they're saying this, and that about these bruises, so we need to. It was brought up in her testimony. The judge even asked her, did you get notes from her? And she's like, well. Karen Neal, a friend and neighbor of the Routiers, appears to be the only defense witness who was honest about the bruises, although it may have been inadvertent. She pointed to the outside of the arm where Darlie's cut was, where you'd expect to see some redness, rather than to the inside. Shook. Was she cut on this side of her arm too? Neal. Yes, she had sutures right there. Shook. And this bruising was up and down near that same area? Neal. Exactly. And we have to remember that Karen Neal was a nurse. Not only was the timing off, but even the appearance of the bruises didn't seem to support a struggle. Alan Brantley is a certified FBI profiler. Because of the nature and symmetry, they certainly don't look like anything that was coincidental to a struggle or being grabbed. It looked like either the arm had been beaten on something or something had beaten onto her. Shook. You've treated people with bruising as if they've been grabbed hard or something like that? Santos. Dr. Santos. Correct. Shook. Maybe a man grabs a woman and pulls her around. Will that leave bruising? Santos. Yes, it can. It depends on whether he grabs her with his bare hands on the forearm. He can leave imprints of fingers and thumb. Shook. As far as the injury to Darlie Routier's right arm, is that the type of bruising? Santos. No, the bruising you showed me in those photographs appeared to be more of a deep bruise. Shook. Again, what we call blunt trauma. Something very striking the arm. Santos. Very possible. Conclusion. As bizarre as it sounds, the right arm bruises were inflicted by Darlie or perhaps a family member sometime after she was discharged from the hospital to bolster her claim of being attacked by an intruder. Now, do bruises appear at different times in different people? Sure, although 4 days is quite a stretch. However, when those bruises appeared, it wasn't nearly as important as what was not seen in the hospital. No redness, no swelling, no discoloration. Not even the beginning stages of bruising. It is inconceivable that every single doctor and nurse, including ME, who checked her injuries, would not have seen such a severe blunt trauma if it existed. A guilty conscience. In addition to the late blooming bruises, there were a few other incidents which indicate that Darlie knew she might be on the police radar. 1. Police took photographs of Darlie's injuries on the afternoon of June 6th. Dr. Dillon stated that she was a bit agitated about why they wanted to photograph her wounds. This is a bit odd, considering that only 3 pictures were taken, and the procedure had been explained to her beforehand. Shook. Was Miss Routier given Xanax in the hospital? Santos. Yes, here it is on the focus notes. 6/6/96 at 16:45, which is 4:45 p.m. She was given 0.25 milligrams of Xanax to decrease her anxiety. I can tell you now that 0.25 is the lowest dose of Xanax. It's called a peach. The other ones are called footballs and bars. That is the lowest dose. I know about Xanax. I went through it with Xanax. It makes you feel instantly drunk. And it fucks your memory up. But when I was on it, this 25 milligram thing, I could take about 7 of those before it even do anything to me. Shook. And can you tell the jurors the entry before that? On 6/6 at 4 p.m.? Santos. Yes, medical examiner and Rowlett police officer here to photograph the wounds. Procedures explained to patient and patient's husband at bedside. Evidence being collected from both husband and patient. Shook. And that's right at 4 o'clock? Right. Santos. Right. Shook. And then at 4:45, she needs a Xanax for anxiety? Santos. Correct. A little bit nervous about those pictures, weren't you there, Miss Routier? 2. The nurse's June 8th note. 2. The nurse's June 8th focus note states, patient requesting med to help relax her. states she is upset about an article she read in a paper. Admittedly, we don't know what article the note refers to, but the heading in the Dallas Morning News that day read, "Robbery ruled out and roulette slayings. Victims were targeted, police say." Something doesn't make sense about someone randomly popping into this house and doing this, Sergeant Dean Poose said. It was not some crazed lunatic walking down the alley and making some left turn and attacking them. 3. Barbara Jovell visited Darlie in the hospital on June the 7th. Shook. Did Darlie make a request there in the room? Jovell. Yes. She asked for everybody to leave the room, but for me to stay behind. Shook. And then what happened? Jovell. She told me that she had sexual toys in the house and that the police were going to see them. Shook. What did you tell her about that? Jovell. I told her, my God, you shouldn't worry about those things. The babies were killed and you almost got killed. Indeed. Why would a mother whose 2 little boys have just been slaughtered be worried about what the police might find in her house? Or having her injuries photographed? Or being upset about a newspaper article? Sure, it would be one gigantic coincidence. But consciousness of guilt is a direct possibility, too. Post-trial. Author Barbara Davis's book, Precious Angels, came out in 1999. In it, she left no doubt in anyone's mind that Darlie Routier had murdered her son. But then, just a few months later, something strange happened. Barbara Davis began appearing on talk shows, claiming that she had been wrong, that Darlie was actually innocent. Vague accusations of prosecutorial misconduct and cover-ups were made, but never supported with any evidence. Most of these baseless allegations have fallen by the wayside over the years. Plain. One of her allegations, though, has stuck around and, in the process, fooled a lot of people. In a 2000 interview with Ann Zimmerman of the Dallas Observer, Davis stated, "The only picture published to the jury was the one showing what they said was a superficial wound to her neck. If I had seen the other pictures, which show that she had the hell beaten out of her, I would have listened to her story more carefully." Around the same time, Miss Davis appeared on Lisa Gibbons' show claiming the photos of Darlie's bruises were compelling. And my question is this: why didn't the prosecutor show them? Fact, both the prosecution and defense showed the numerous photos of Darlie's bruises to the jury. Multiple witnesses, including Dr. Santos, Dillon, and DeMeo, were questioned extensively about all of her injuries. Shook. Where does this bruise extend from? Dr. Santos. It appears to go from her wrist to right below where her hand is, past her elbow, and up toward almost to her armpit. Shook. Okay, and then 52E, that's an even more close-up photograph of that bruise. Santos. Yes, correct. Shook. If you could take those 2 photographs and go along the jury rail so all the jurors can see. Santos. Okay. Not to mention that Barb Davis came back years later. First she said the jury didn't see those photographs. In her book, Precious Angels, you could see that she put those photographs in the book and later claimed she never saw them. But later in the interview, she said they sure did see those pictures, but they were mixed in with 1,000 other things, and they were cold and tired. Barb Davis, rest her soul, was a liar. I don't know I don't know how Darlie Key can be standing at the graveside of her grandsons hugging this woman after she read that book. Read the book, Precious Angels. Barb Davis, before she died, said all that she was mistaken. Every bit of it. Every bit of it. Mulder. Admit exhibits 82 through 92. The ones in the hospital are June 6th. The Polaroid is June 6th. And the rest are June 10th. Could you come up here so that Richard and John maybe, so we can show the jury the various photos we're talking about? Damaging Barbara Davis's credibility even more is the fact that she had graphically described Darlie's bruises on page 306 in her book. Blunt trauma was responsible for solid and massive bruises covering the underside of Darlie's right arm, extending from the wrist all the way to the armpit. How could she describe those bruises then, several months later, claim she never saw them? Even Doug Mulder, Darlie's defense attorney, stated in a televised interview that the photos were shown at trial. Almost 2 decades later, Miss Davis is still repeating this fallacy, even though in a slightly altered manner. On CNN's Death Row Stories, airing in 2015, Barbara Davis said she had bruises up and down her arm. If the jurors had seen it, it would have been a different outcome. But they didn't even look at the evidence. When the prosecution gets on their high horse and says, these pictures are right there, they sure were, with thousands of other things. and they made sure they were mixed in. The jury was not going to sift through those pictures. How would Barb Davis know what photos the jurors looked at? How would she know that they made sure they were mixed in? How would she know that the jury did not look through the evidence? She wasn't in the deliberation room. But she did sit through every day of that trial. Every day of it. All of it. Where they showed the pictures, they discussed the bruising, and then she came back later and said, I didn't see him. On the Lisa Gibbons show, you could see, as Barb Davis is explaining the lie detector test, she said, I know what she was asked, and she failed it. She failed it. Sorelda Routier, Darren's mother, turns to her and says, we can sue you for that. And Barb Davis at the time said, well, I'm not bothered. Go ahead. Then the next segment, Darlie's innocent. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Dun, dun, dun. Justice for Devin and Damon.